Hi everyone and welcome to the Empowered You podcast. I'm Chavi Israel, your host, speaking to you from Sydney, Australia. After October 7, I found myself in uncomfortable situations, not sure how to respond or navigate. That's why I created the Empowered You, first an organization and now a podcast to equip you with the knowledge, skills, and tools surrounding Israel and your Jewish identity. In each episode, we'll explore various topics from multiple perspectives so that you can feel informed, empowered, and proud of who you are. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Hi everyone. Today we are going to be doing a different type of episode. I guess you can call it an extra episode where I am not interviewing anyone, but I will be instead reviewing a shiur that I gave over today. The date today is the 8th of March and the Hebrew date is the 8th day of Adar, Chet Adar, which is actually my mother's Hebrew birthday, and her Hebrew name is Sarah Esther Bas Rachel Leah, and I want to just dedicate this shiur to her that she should continue to have many more happy and healthy years. So I don't usually record shiurim, but this shiur that I gave today was very apropos and very much connected to the Empowered You. So I'm going to share it with you all. I'm recording this podcast now. It's on Motzei Shabbat. Today, it was Parshat Tetzaveh, and today it was Shabbat Zachor. We are commanded to go to Shule. It is actually a mitzvah. Remember what Amalek did to us. And it is always the Shabbos before Purim, specifically because the evil Haman, the evil villain in the Purim story, was a direct descendant from Amalek. So we are commanded to go to Shule and to hear and remember Zachor, what Amalek did to us, and to also remember to erase them, Timche. Now this shiur is not going to be focusing on what it means to erase them, and that also is not necessarily a physical thing. It's also the idea of combating evil, of standing up for injustices that are occurring. But today's focus is going to be on memory, Zachor. And this idea of memory is something that is very much prevalent, especially nowadays. Memory is something that shapes Judaism. And in fact, our identity is very much linked to memory. For instance, we're going to be celebrating Purim in less than a week. And when we do the 4 mitzvot of Purim, and we hear the Megillah, and we dress up, and we give mishloach manot, and we give money to the poor, matanot le'evyonim, we are remembering the Purim story. And more than that, we also see our values that are important to us as Jews. So for instance, for Purim, the concept of helping the poor, matanot le'evyonim. Well, Pesach is coming up very soon, and we see how Pesach literally is a huge part of the Jewish people's collective memory, where we all come together and we celebrate the Seder. We relive the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim somewhat from an experiential and pedagogical perspective. It's really the best thing. We eat matzah, just like they did back in Egypt, and we dip the bitter herbs into salt water, and we eat the maror. All of these different elements jog our collective memory, and also shows us Jewish values, such as the idea that the Pesach story is all about telling your children, and it's centered around the children and the family and the idea of Jewish continuity. And this is a Jewish value. So as we can see, memory is something that is not necessarily always negative, also positive, but it really shapes and influences us as Jewish people. For us, some may call the negative memories intergenerational trauma, and in many ways it very much is, which is why, for instance, when we see graffiti or vandalism, it triggers our collective memory as a people and this intergenerational trauma. For us, the vandalism, it means so much more than just words. It has so much more meaning. And also as Jews, we know that it might start with the vandalism, but it definitely doesn't end there. And we know this from our intergenerational trauma / collective memory. Whilst a non-Jew might see that there was vandalism on a kindergarten, and they might think, well, what's the big deal? It's just some words, but they don't have that collective memory and that intergenerational trauma that us Jews have. And so for them, it doesn't necessarily mean as much. So as we can see, the idea of collective memory as Jewish people is key to our faith and our survival as a people, because how can we know where we are going if we don't know where we are coming from. And that's why it is so important for us as Jews also to remember what Amalek did to us. For those who might be unaware, Jewish people's a family starting with Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, and the 12 tribes. Long story, we end up in Egypt for 210 years because Yosef, one of the 12 tribes, is sold as a slave, ends up becoming the prime minister of Egypt. There's a famine. We end up in Egypt. We're slaves for 210 years. And we leave Egypt, and after 40 days of traveling, we finally receive the Torah. It says that there were 600,000 souls there, and every single Jewish soul to this very moment was present at Mount Sinai, Har Sinai. And this is where we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will listen and we will do, and we actually accepted the mantleship of being the Jewish people. And this is really where Judaism went from being a family and tribe and a people to a formal organized religion. And we were the untouchables. We had all of these miracles, the 10 plagues, the sea splitting, receiving the Torah, and then the tribe of Amalek came and cooled us down, and they attacked us. And they showed that us Jews were not the untouchables. And they were the first nation to come and attack us. And we're commanded to remember and to never forget and to erase them. Amalek, they are the representation of pure evil. They represent everything that opposes goodness, morality, and values. And I was thinking about with the rise of anti-Semitism, especially post-October the 7th, and this concept of memory, I could not help but think about numerous similarities between the Purim story, which is coming up this Friday, and what is going on right now. So the similarities that I have come up with, the first obvious one is that the evil Haman, the evil villain who was a direct descendant of Amalek, wanted to completely obliterate the Jewish people. He wanted to commit genocide, intentional genocide. He wanted every single Jewish man, woman, and child to be wiped out. Hamas, it is no secret, they don't want to just get rid of Israel. They want to kill every single Jew, and this is explicitly stated in their charter. Both Haman and Hamas were existential threats, and for us, unfortunately, Hamas is still somewhat of an existential threat to the Jewish people. Another similarity that I was thinking of was the world's indifference. The idea that in the Purim story, no one really cared. Everyone just let it happen. And we see that nowadays many people are indifferent. And you might think, what's the big deal? Okay, they're indifferent. They don't care. At least they're not encouraging it. At least they're not perpetrating it. But what's interesting is when I teach my year 10s about the Holocaust, we learn about the concept of being an upstander and a bystander, and how being indifferent is very much being complicit, because when you as a human being allow for injustices to occur, for people's bad behavior to occur, and you remain silent, your indifference is allowing the perpetrators to continue doing their injustices. And this is really what a bystander is. And so I think about this idea of the world's indifference in the times of the Purim story and in the times of now. I also was thinking about the idea of Jewish awakening and unity. How in the Purim story, the Jewish people come together and reunite. And similarly, right now, the Jewish people have really come together and united, which is a beautiful thing. Also, the idea of standing up against evil. Esther, she went to the king uninvited. She risked her own life. Mordechai in the Purim story refused to bow down to Haman, risking his own life too. And similarly, nowadays, people might not be risking their lives physically, but Jewish people have started to stand up against evil. Advocate and our ambassadors for the Jewish people, they are standing up for themselves. Another idea is defending ourselves. On the 13th and 14th day of Adar, the Jewish people were able to defend themselves against their enemies. And similarly now, thank God, we have the state of Israel, where Jewish people, finally, after thousands of years since the destruction of the Second Temple, have an army where we can defend ourselves, where Jewish blood isn't cheap. Post-October the 7th, after all the inhumane, brutal atrocities that Hamas did, Jewish people could finally defend themselves, and we had an army to defend ourselves. Another idea that I found was Hashem's hiddenness. We know that in the Purim story, In the Megillah, Hashem's name is not mentioned once. But of course, Hashem was there dictating everything that happened. And similarly now, we may feel that, where is God? How could God allow for such things to happen? But God is very much relevant and prevalent throughout everything. And this connects me to my last similarity that I thought of, which is that in the Purim story, the unexpected turn of events. We know that in the Purim story, everything was v'nahafachol. Everything was turned on its head. Right now, we live in a very corrupt and twisted world where for us as Jews, everything is black and white. We can see good, we can see bad. We can see Hamas is pure evil. It's obvious. And yet, there are so many people who are logical thinkers, people who are families, who are blinded for some peculiar reason. They can't actually see the difference between good and bad, even though it's staring them directly in the face. And this idea of v'nahafachol, everything turned around. In the Purim story, the evil Haman, he ends up being hung on the gallows that he built for Mordechai. And in the end, our enemies end up getting destroyed, not the Jewish people. And so I believe and I pray that, please God, we will also have a complete v'nahafachol, a complete turn of the unexpected events. Right now, as Jews, we're facing a lot of hate. Israel is facing a lot of hate. We're dealing with things that are negative for us as a people. But please God, godliness will be revealed. It's actually in this week's Parsha where the Jewish people are commanded to build a Mishkan. And it says, V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. That when you build a mikdash, a place for me where I can dwell, I will dwell with you all. This is God speaking. And we should have that complete v'nahafachol, that complete turnover. And God should be able to be open and not hidden anymore, but openly revealed in this world for everyone to see the truth and to feel the truth. And that there should only be peace and harmony for all of humanity. But what I'm actually focusing on specifically tonight is the concept of anti-Semitism. And as I've done a whole lot of similarities, we're going to look at the Purim story and we're going to see the two different layers of anti-Semitism. Based on this, we're going to see how we can navigate today's challenges and overcome anti-Semitism. I also want to say that this is based on Lakutei Sichot, Purim 5740, which was 1980, volume 16, Parshat Tetzaveh. This is a talk that was given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and these two forms of anti-Semitism that I'm going to be unpacking is his ideas and his Torah. So, I'm now going to read for us directly from the source. This is from the Talmud, Megillah 13a, and I'm going to read for us verbatim what it says in the Talmud. Haman said to Achashverosh, "There is one people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws are diverse from those of every people, nor do they keep the king's laws. Therefore it does not profit the king to tolerate them." This is from Megillas Esther 3:8. Rava said, "There was none who knew how to slander like Haman, as in his request to the king, he included responses to all the reasons Achashverosh might be reluctant to destroy the Jewish people. He said to Achashverosh, 'Let us destroy them.' Achashverosh said to him, 'I am afraid of their God, lest he do to me as he did to those who stood against them before me.' Haman said to him, 'They have been asleep with respect to the Mitzvah. Having ceased to observe the Mitzvah, there is therefore no reason to fear.' So Achashverosh was scared because of the Jewish God, and Haman saying, 'Don't worry, the Jewish people, they've abandoned their beliefs. They've integrated into Persian society. Their God won't be there for them.' Haman continued with his next response. 'Perhaps you will say that I am making a bold spot in your kingdom, i.e. you fear that if an entire nation is wiped out, then there'll be a desolate area within the kingdom. There is no need to worry. They are scattered amongst the peoples, and eradicating them will not result in the creation of an unpopulated zone in the area where they had once lived. Furthermore, perhaps you will say that there is benefit from them, but this is a nation that cannot bear offspring, and there is no benefit to be gained from them.' Haman continued, 'Their laws are diverse from those of every people. They do not eat from our food, nor do they marry from our women, nor do they marry off their women to us, nor do they keep the king's laws. They spend the entire year in idleness. For example, they keep the Shabbat They keep Pesach every single second. There's another Sabbath, there's another festival. They're lazy. Therefore, it does not profit the king to tolerate them, as they eat and drink and scorn the throne. And a proof of this is that even if a fly falls into the cup of wine, they will throw the fly out and drink the wine. But if my master the king were to touch the glass of the wine, they would throw it to the ground and would not drink it, since it is prohibited to drink wine that was touched by a Gentile. This is a Jewish law that if a wine is not mevushal, not cooked, if a non-Jew touches it, then a Jew can't technically drink it. Haman obviously had a deep understanding of the intricacies of the halachot, of the Jewish laws. And we know this because back in Babylonia, where Haman came from, he was a barber. And I guess just like nowadays when you go and get a haircut, or for the religious women who go to the wig lady, the sheitzamacha, you chat and you talk. And so Haman knew a lot. There's also a midrash that tells us that when Haman was walking from Babylonia to Persia, he was walking with a whole bunch of Jewish people as well, including Mordechai, the Jew. And on their journey, Haman had eaten all of his food and finished all of his water, and he was extremely thirsty, dehydrated, malnourished, and pretty much starving, and was on the brink of dying. And so he went to Mordechai the Jew, and he begged Mordechai to give him a little bit of food, a little bit of water, because Mordechai was smart and didn't eat all his food and water at once. He drank slowly, little bits. He ate little bits. In the end, Mordechai agreed to give Haman a bit of his food and water on condition that Haman would agree to be his slave. And they actually wrote a contract on the bottom of Mordechai's foot. And every time Haman would see Mordechai and would expect him to bow down to him, Mordechai would point to his foot and show him and say, remember this contract that we made that you never kept? So actually Mordechai saved Haman's life. But regardless, what I'm trying to show is that Haman knew Jewish people intricately and deeply. Back to the Gemara. Therefore Haman concluded, if it please the king, let it be written that they be destroyed, and I will weigh out 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have the charge of the business, to bring it to the king's treasuries. This idea that Haman actually was trying to bribe the king so that he could officially make the commandment to kill all the Jews. Achashverosh responded to Haman's request, and the king said to Haman, the silver is given to you, the people also, to do with them as it seems good to you. There was no need for convincing Achashverosh. He said, Haman, don't worry about giving me money. Do whatever you need to do. I don't mind. The actions of Achashverosh and Haman can be understood with the parable. To what may they be compared? To two individuals, one of whom had a mound in the middle of his field, and the other of whom had a ditch in the middle of his field, each one suffering from his own predicament. The owner of the ditch, noticing the other's mound of dirt, said to himself, who will give me this mound of dirt suitable for filling in my ditch? I would even be willing to pay for it with money. And the owner of the mound, noticing the other's ditch, said to himself, who will give me this ditch for money, so that I may use it to remove the mound of earth from my property? At a later point, one day, they happened to have met one another. The owner of the ditch said to the owner of the mound, sell me your mound so I can fill in my ditch. The mound's owner, anxious to rid himself of the excess dirt on his property, said to him, take it for free, if only you had done so sooner. Similarly, Achashverosh himself wanted to destroy the Jews, as he was delighted that Haman had similar aspirations and was willing to do the job for him. He demanded no money from him. And so what we can see from this parable that is brought down in the Talmud is that really Haman was doing Achashverosh a favor, because Achashverosh, he didn't like the Jews. And so when Haman said to him that I want to get rid of these people, Achashverosh said, go ahead, you don't even need to pay me. You're doing me a favor. And he gave him his signet ring, which is what allowed Haman then to put out the evil decree saying that all Jewish men, women, and children would be killed. Now, I want to focus on these two levels of anti-Semitism that we can see here in the Purim story between Achashverosh and Haman. So Achashverosh is the superficial anti-Semite. He is someone who has a mound in his field. It's an inconvenience, it doesn't fit, and it's bothersome, it's different, it's out of place. For Achashverosh, his hatred towards the Jews was more on a superficial level. It was xenophobia. He didn't like the Jews because they were different. They looked different, they act different, they dressed different. He just didn't like them. He didn't deeply feel threatened by them. He just had xenophobia and didn't like people who were different to him. But what we see with Haman is Haman had a ditch in his field. His field was empty. What we see about Haman is that he really had an inner emptiness and void. For him, when he saw a Jew, it wasn't just that they were different. It wasn't that he was just simply jealous. This was a deeply personal and existential threat to himself. Because when he saw a Jew, it triggered him because it showed him that he had this emptiness inside of him. And we see this really because Haman had everything. Haman had wealth, he had fame, power, respect. He was the prime minister. In fact, every single person that saw him had to bow down to him, which is why it triggered him so much. Every time he would see Mordechai, and it says in the Megillah, yet all this means nothing to me. Every time I see Mordechai the Jew sitting at the king's gate, all of his wealth and fame meant nothing to him, because when he would see Mordechai, and Mordechai refused to bow down to him, it triggered him because he could sense that Mordechai, who represents all of the Jews, was a man with a mission, a man with a purpose. Not bowing down to Haman was risking your own life, but Mordechai didn't care. He was willing to risk his own life and self-preservation for something so much greater. For Mordechai knew who he was. Mordechai knew what he represented. He represented godliness and morality in the world. Mordechai's existence is something that all Jewish people's existence are for, which is for a higher mission and purpose. And Haman had this emptiness and void, where for him, every time he saw a Jew, it triggered that. It reminded him of his emptiness and of his void. And it's interesting because you could say that Haman was just jealous, or why didn't he try and achieve that? But for Haman, his jealousy was an even deeper jealousy, because when someone else has something, let's say the latest iPhone, and you get the latest iPhone, well then there's really no more reason to be jealous. But with Haman, it wasn't just jealousy. For him, he couldn't bear the sight of Mordechai. He couldn't bear the sight of a Jew. For him, it was an existential threat that needed to be eliminated. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe shares that with these two levels of anti-Semitism, the first of the superficial one, you could say, where people maybe are jealous or threatened because we're different. That's a level of anti-Semitism that can be dealt with also through advocacy, through being ambassadors for the Jewish people. But then there is another deeper level, the Haman level, where it really doesn't matter what you say to these people, your existence is threatening. It's their reaction to the fact that you as a Jew have a higher purpose. And having this higher purpose, by the way, is not always going to be something negative, meaning it's not only going to cause Jew haters. I want to share a story where I was in Toronto 8 years ago waiting to catch the bus from Toronto to Montreal, and I sat next to an African man from the Congo, and I said to him, yeah, I'm Jewish, whatever, I'm chatting about myself, and suddenly tears welled up in his eyes, and he started to bow down to me, literally. And I was so shocked. I had never seen a response like this, and I was like, oh my gosh, please stop bowing down to me. It kind of made me uncomfortable. And he said, you don't understand. In my church, we pray for you. We pray for the land of Israel. You guys are the chosen people. Do you realize how unbelievable it is? I've never met a Jew in my life. You're the first Jew that I've ever met. And for me, I was like, well, I didn't even choose this way of life. Although, thank God, I wouldn't want to be anything else other than a Jew. A Jew is my essence. I am first and foremost a Jew, way more than I am my name, my family. I am a Jew in my innermost core. Every fiber of my being is a Jew, but I never realized what it really meant to be chosen in that way. He noticed that, and he was so overcome that he even started to bow down to me. Don't worry, he stopped bowing down to me, and we had a very lovely chat. But being different, people realize that for good and for bad. And that's also why perhaps when a Jewish person does something immoral, it is on the headlines. It makes the latest social media or TV shows or whatever it might be. And it's like, wait a second, people are flawed. We know that God created us with free choice. We know that God gave us a good inclination and a bad inclination. Everyone's battling it out, Jew and non-Jew alike. So yeah, there are Jewish people, unfortunately, that do bad things, but why is it reaching the headlines? What's the big deal? Non-Jewish people also do bad things. But it's because even society realizes and acknowledges that Jewish people are here for a higher purpose and mission. We're here to be a light unto the nations and Or LaGoyim. And when a Jewish person doesn't keep that and maintain that high standard, the world actually gets upset. They actually expect better from us, which is why it's headline worthy. And I want to just say about being chosen, I've had a few conversations where people have said to me, I don't like this chosen argument. It sounds like we think we're superior. Being chosen does not mean that we are superior. Being chosen means that we are different. That we as Jewish people, we were put on this world to maintain high ethics and values and to be the sense of morality. We know that Avraham Avinu, Abraham, the first Jew, this is who he was. He was emblematic of that. We come from Avraham Avinu. This is what our mission is. And I always think about Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof, who says, God, I don't want to be chosen. Let me tell you something. Being a Jew, being a frum Jew, a religious Jew, sometimes it's an inconvenience when I'm at the supermarket and the person who's checking me out is taking their time and I'm in a bit of a rush, but I'm very cognizant of the fact that, hey, I'm wearing my headscarf, my Magen David necklace. I'm a Jew. And I've got to make sure to maintain this sense of morality all the time. And I'm human, and sometimes I want to say, okay, can you be a bit faster or be a bit pushy or rush? So it's difficult. And for Orthodox men who wear their kippot, they're also cognizant of the fact that they represent more than just themselves, that they represent the Jewish people. And being Jewish, I want to stress again and again, it does not mean that we think that we are better. On the contrary, we just have to live up to a higher standard. We have a different mission and purpose. And it's not something that every Jewish person might, even be entirely happy with, but this is who we are. It is our existence. We don't have a choice in this matter. I also want to say that it is really important that we make sure that we never, ever blame ourselves as Jews for being hated. And my students have said to me, what did we do to deserve it? We must have done something. We must have done something to deserve the Shoah, the Holocaust. And we unpacked it, and it's a whole conversation. Obviously, we know that going down that rabbit hole is a very dangerous rabbit hole because the responsibility lies with the hater. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Allah Shalom, says, hate exists in the mind of the hater. Never in this world would we ever accuse someone who, for example, God forbid, got sexually assaulted. We never ever put the focus on the victim. You put the focus on the perpetrator. And similarly with anti-Semitism, Jewish people, we cannot blame ourselves. This is nothing to do really with what we're doing. It exists in the mind of the hater. It's on them. It's not anything that we are doing. And so how can we respond to both of these levels of anti-Semitism? Well, the first thing is that Jewish people, we need to realize that when we try and blend in and we try and integrate and assimilate into regular society, we might think, oh, well, people hate us because we're different, so let's not be so different. And then maybe they'll stop hating us. And we see this even Moses Mendelssohn, the father of the Reform movement, as he's known, and also he was a brilliant philosopher and academic. For him, he cared about Judaism, but he also didn't want Jew hatred to exist. And he thought, well, if Jewish people will leave the ghettos and be emancipated and integrate into wider society, we're not going to be hated. Theodor Herzl also had this idea where he thought, you know what, we're hated because we don't have a country. The Germans have Germany, the Swiss have Switzerland, the French have France. And if the Jews will have Israel, we won't be hated anymore. And of course, now we know, I don't need to tell everyone, that the modern day anti-Semitism, it disguises itself very much nowadays as anti-Zionism. I would say that 90% of the time when people claim to be an anti-Zionist, they're actually very much anti-Jewish. So it doesn't matter how much we blend in, how much we think if we're like this, if we're like that, if we just are like regular society, whatever that means, Jew hatred won't exist. We know that the Jews in Germany were more German than Jewish, or as Eddie Jaku says in his book, The Happiest Man Alive, the Jews in Germany were more German than German. And when it came to Nazi Germany, Hitler didn't care if you were on the highest part of society, the upper echelons, if you were this brain surgeon or this lawyer or this politician, or you were a Hasidic Jew, in Hitler's eyes, a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. We see this also with the Spanish Inquisition in 1492, the golden age of Spain, where Jews were a part of society. Their lives were thriving from a physical perspective, and then they were all expelled or forced to convert or die. So we see that how can we respond properly to anti-Semitism? The solution is that we need to own our identity. We need to respect ourselves. We need to stand firm in who we are. We need to make sure that no matter what, we are first and foremost Jewish, and that we are more Jewish and not less Jewish, especially when anti-Semitism is on the rise. And when Jewish people actually are openly Jewish, whether that means for someone to wear their Magen David, or to put a mezuzah on their front door, or tell someone they're Jewish, or have a conversation about their Jewish identity or Israel. Whatever it means to each individual of what it means to be Jewish, when you are open and you are proud of who you are, not only do people respect you for it, but you are actually creating a more tolerant society. Jewish presence in this world enriches society. When a Jew has a big Hanukkah menorah gathering or a big Lag BaOmer parade, it is creating a more tolerant society where society actually is enriched. Not only just Jewish people have a voice, but every marginalized group has a voice, especially in a society where we try and be tolerant of all minority groups, marginalized groups. Us as Jews, we need to own our identity and be proud of our identity, because that helps create a more tolerant society for everyone. Going back to the Purim story, we can see that for King Ahasuerus, the Talmud calls him a fool, because for him, his anti-Semitism, his Jew hatred, was xenophobia. And when Esther finally revealed her true Jewish identity at the second feast, where she says that there's someone who wants to kill me and my people, we see that Ahasuerus, he has a turning point where he is woken up suddenly and he realizes, oh my gosh, these Jewish people who I thought were foreign and weird and different, they're not weird or different. My wife, my beloved wife, who I chose out of the thousands of women. I could have chosen anyone to be my wife, but I chose Esther. Esther, who represented morality, refinement, who had the most exemplar character traits, who was beautiful inside and out. Esther is a Jew. And for Ahasuerus, it was like this light bulb moment where he realized, my gosh, Esther isn't different. In fact, Esther is one of the most incredible, unbelievable people that I've ever met in my entire life. And she's a Jew. And he realized Jewish people, they're not that different after all. In fact, they're actually unbelievable. And that's why we see such a switch when, as soon as Esther reveals her identity, Ahasuerus gets so angry and enraged that he straight away commands for Haman to be hung on the gallows that he built for Mordechai. And it also shows us something in our lives that really, for the anti-Semites who are just racist or prejudiced or have these biases, when they meet another Jew and they realize Jewish people are actually nice, they're kind, they're not that bad, they don't have horns, they're not, portrayed as I may see on social media, etc. When you humanize that relationship, these Jew haters who just are hating Jews because they're different, they realize, wait a second, Jews are not that much different. And that's why actually speaking to people and sharing your identity and sharing who you are really does help, because it does create a more tolerant society, but it also shows that, oh, Jewish people are normal just like everyone else. Wait, remind me again why I hate the Jews so much? And we see how that human-to-human connection, whether it be your doctor, your physio, your therapist, any of those kind of people that you have somewhat of a relationship with, it's so important that they know about your Jewish identity, because that really can change their whole viewpoint of how they view Jews. With regards, though, to the deeper level of anti-Semitism, we need to realize that we can never, ever accept or give in to this deep anti-Semitism that exists. That our strength and our responsibility and how we need to respond is by actually being even prouder Jews. We need to remember that we need to be empowered. Whatever that means, each and every one of us, it may mean something different. but we need to reclaim and re-own our Jewish identity. Esther won not by blending in. Eventually, she saved all the Jews by saying, I am a Jew, and by standing loud and proud and being empowered. That is the only way to properly respond to Jew hatred, to properly respond to anti-Semitism. We need to start owning who we are and what we stand for. And this is the only way that a Jew can go about both levels of anti-Semitism. And really, when people see a Jewish person living up to their standards, living up to their expectations, being an Or LaGoyim, being a person who spreads goodness and kindness, someone who is a mensch, they respect you so much more. And so I hope that we can take from this shiur a lesson. And obviously it's difficult, and I've had moments where I don't always feel empowered, but that we should be able to have the strength to tap into our greatness, to tap into our soul, which is a chelek Elokai mimal mamash, a literal piece of God. And we should tap into those special powers that exist within us and be a light unto the nations and be proud, empowered Jews.